Hey, what's up? Today, I will teach you how to use the very misunderstood Figma Auto Layout. And the next time someone asks you,
Do you know how to use auto layout?
you say, yes, sir. So, what is auto layout? A lot of people love to overcomplicate the definition. They say something like, auto layout is a constraints-based system that dynamically adjusts the position, spacing, and size of elements based on predefined rules, ensuring responsive adaptability within a frame.
What you said again?
Auto layout is a tool in Figma that automatically arranges and resizes elements inside of a frame, keeping everything aligned and organized as you make changes. It's that simple. So here we have two cards, okay? And this one at the top doesn't have auto layout activated. And then this one at the bottom has auto layout activated. So when I try to stretch this one, this is what happens. All right, not cool. And then when I try to stretch this one, this is what happens. Amazing. And let's see what happens if I shrink them. As you can see, this one adapts beautifully and this one doesn't. That's the magic of auto layout. All right, so now we have this button right here, and let's see how these cards behave when we add this button inside. Okay, so this is the frame that doesn't have auto layout at the top, right? So when we add this button right here, this is what happens. All right, we have to basically manually resize the frame, okay, this card. And then if we add it here, this is what happens. These three elements, the image, the text, and the button, are perfectly spaced and perfectly aligned, okay? If I wanted to accomplish the same thing in the frame that doesn't have auto layout, I would have to basically resize the frame and then place the button right here and then align it right here, right? So it's very time consuming. Now I will show you how a frame that has auto layout activated behaves on a simple element like this button right here. This button doesn't have auto layout activated right now, okay? So when I remove part of the text, nothing happens. Now if I select this frame and then I press Shift plus A on my keyboard and then I remove part of the text inside of this button, we can see how it adapts. And then if I add more text inside, we can see how the button adapts. In order to activate auto layout, you select the frame and then you press Shift plus A on your keyboard. And as you can see here, we have auto layout activated. After you activate auto layout, you will see these options here in the properties panel. And to deactivate auto layout, you simply click on this icon right here. Auto layout in Figma is composed of four main pillars: layout and direction, spacing, resizing and scaling, and nesting and hierarchy. And I will explain them to you one by one right now. Before we continue, I want to give you a gift. I've created a guide that tells you exactly when to use auto layout. You can get it for free right now. The link is in the description of this video. Now let's continue with the auto layout pillars. This pillar basically controls how elements are arranged inside of the auto layout frame. Now I will activate auto layout on this frame so I can show you how it works. Here in the properties panel, we can see these arrows right here, and these arrows are used to control the direction of the elements. So basically we can set them vertically or we can set them horizontally. If there are many elements in one row and then you want them to wrap to a new line as you resize the frame, you can activate the wrap option right here. And then when you resize the frame, you will see how the last element will move to a new line, okay? Now I will show you why the direction option is so powerful. So here we have two frames, one with auto layout activated, as we can see here, okay? And then one without auto layout. Now let's say we want to place this frame that doesn't have auto layout activated horizontally, and the elements that are inside also place horizontally. We would have to select these elements inside and then we place them outside of the frame. Then we select this frame and then here in the properties panel, we click on this icon to rotate the frame 90 degrees. And then we basically place these elements inside again, okay, one by one. And then we can select them all and then create a group by clicking here. And then we select the frame again. And then here in the properties panel, we click here and then here to center the elements. And now let's say we want to make this frame larger while keeping the elements inside centered. We would have to select this frame and then we enlarge the frame like this, all right? And then while we have the frame selected here in the properties panel, we click here and then here as well, all right? Now we have everything centered. If we want to resize the frame, we can do so, but then we have to, again, while we have this frame selected, go to the properties panel and then click here and then here to center the elements that are inside. As you can see, it's so time consuming for something so simple. Now let's do the same thing with the one that has auto layout activated. So we select the frame and then here in the properties panel, we click on this icon right here. Now we go to the auto layout panel again, and then we click here to align all the elements to the center. And now if we want to enlarge this, amazing. So basically we leverage auto layout to achieve the same outcome way more efficiently. Now let's say we want to move this star right here to the left, okay? So we want it to be the first star starting from the left. So we would basically have to do it manually. Something like this. All right, something like this. And then if we have auto layout, we can just select the star and then we press the left arrow on our keyboard 2 times. That's it. Now let's say we want this button right here to be placed between the image and the text. Okay, if we don't have auto layout activated, we would have to basically do it manually. Place it right here and then right here. Make sure it's aligned. Okay, and then if we have auto layout, we can just select the button and then press the up arrow once. That's it. Auto layout basically helps us be way more efficient when we are designing. Auto layout also gives us the option to align the elements inside of the auto layout frame by simply clicking here, okay? When you click here, for example, it will align the elements to the left. If you click here, to the right, and then if you click here, top center, and then here to the bottom center, okay? So you can basically align the elements with one click. Now let's talk about the second pillar, spacing, okay? Basically padding and gaps. In order to add a fixed space between items, you can just select the frame, and then here in the properties panel, you write the desired space. For example, 60 pixels. And now, as we can see here, we have a 60 pixel space between items. And if we click while we hover and then we drag the cursor, we can basically set a different space. Let's set it again to 60 pixels. So right here, we write 60. Here in the properties panel, while we have this frame selected, we can see this icon right here. And this is called packed. So basically it allows a fixed space between items. And if we resize the frame, the space remains the same, okay? And then if we double click this icon right here, now we have the space between items set to auto. And auto allows Figma to automatically adjust the spacing dynamically as we resize the frame. Let's set back the space between items to 60 pixels. And then let's align the elements to the center. Now let's explore the padding options. The padding options right here allow us to set a space between the edge of the frame and the elements inside. Let's say we want a padding of 40 pixels on all sides. Okay, so here in the properties panel, we set it to 40. And now we have a padding of 40 pixels here and then 40 pixels here. And now to complete all sides, we can add a 40 pixel padding to the top and then a 40 pixel padding to the bottom. And to do it, we go here in the properties panel and then here we set it to 40 pixels. And now we have 40 pixels here and then here and here and also here. There is also a quick shortcut if you want to add the same padding on all sides. You just go here in the properties panel and then here you press Control, and then while you press and maintain Control, you click here, and now you write your desired padding. Let's say 60 pixels now. And now, as we can see here, we have 60 pixels here, and then here, and here, and also here. And if you want to add a padding to a single side, for example, to the bottom, all right here, you go to the Properties panel, you click on this icon, and then this is the bottom. So here we can add 100 pixels, for example. And now we have here 100 pixels. Now let's talk about resizing. And we have three options: fixed, okay, hug, and fill container. I will explain each. The first option I will explain is fixed. So if I select this frame, and then I go here in the properties panel, I can see how it's set to fix because when I click on this arrow, I can see how the width is set to fix. And then when I click here, I can see how the height is set to fix as well. If I resize this frame, we can see how the shape that's inside doesn't resize. And that's because the shape is set to fix as well, as we can see, right? So it will remain with the same size. If I resize this frame, the same thing happens. And that's because this text is set to fix. And if we add more text, it goes out of frame. And that's because this frame is set to fix, so it doesn't move. Now let's see if we select this frame, and then we set it to hug. Okay, so horizontally to hug, and then vertically to hug. Now, since we have the width set to hug and then the height set to hug, we can see how this frame adapts to the width and the height of the text. And then if we remove some of these paragraphs, we can see how the frame adapts automatically. And then if we select this frame, and then we set it to hug, it will also adapt to the size of the shape, respecting the padding. This option basically hugs the content. One thing you have to be aware of is that if you select this frame, and then you can see how it's set to hug, right? If you resize it manually, it will go automatically to fixed. And that's because you are breaking the hug behavior the moment you resize the frame manually, okay? And that makes sense because you are asking Figma not to hug the content. And then this frame containing this image or the shape is set to hug, right? So if we copy this shape and then we paste it here, we can see how the frame adapts automatically. Still, when we resize this frame, we don't have that nice responsive behavior. That's why it's important to learn how to use the fill container option. Now, if we select this frame and then we want to change it to fill container, we can't. Why? Because this is a parent frame and it doesn't have anything to fill. So a parent frame can only be set to hug or fixed, okay? Unless the parent frame is nested inside of another frame. And don't worry, because I will explain how nested frames work. Now let's remove this shape, and then let's select this shape, and let's set it to fill, okay? So the width set to fill, and then the height set to fill. And now if we select the frame, and then we press and maintain Shift to keep the aspect ratio, we resize the frame, and we can see how the shape is responsive. And then same thing with the text. If we select it, and then we set it to fill container, and then we resize this frame, we can see how the text is now responsive. Now let's talk about the fourth pillar, nesting and hierarchy. Nesting basically means adding a frame inside of a frame. So this frame right here, this light blue frame, okay, is the child frame. And this one, this royal blue frame, is the parent frame. So when we add this frame inside of this frame is a nested frame. And then this frame is a parent frame, okay? We can manipulate both frames individually. So for example, if we want to set the nested frame to cover the entire area of the parent frame, We can do it by selecting the parent frame. And then here in the properties panel, we press and maintain control, and then we click, and then we set the padding to 0 on all sides. And then now we select the nested frame, and then here in the properties panel, we set it to fill container. So the width is set to fill container, okay? And we can also set the height to fill container. Now it's covering the entire area. Let's select the parent frame again, and then let's set a padding of 30 pixels on all sides. And now if we resize the parent frame, we will see how the nested frame will also resize, okay? This is an example of nesting and hierarchy. So this is the parent frame, okay? And then here we have a nested frame, and then here we have another nested frame containing the text, and then here we have another nested frame, which is the button. A child frame can also be a parent frame. So this sky blue frame, all right, is the child of this royal blue frame. Okay, so the royal blue frame is the parent, as we saw before, and then this one is the child, the sky blue. Now, if we take this orange frame and then we place it inside of this sky blue frame, now the sky blue frame is the parent of this orange frame, while also being the child frame of this royal blue frame. Now I will show you a very nice feature named Ignore Auto Layout. So if we have this label right here, and then we want to place it on top of this image and move it freely, if we drag it right here, we can see how it doesn't work, right? Because it's basically constrained by the auto layout. So if we select the label, right, and then we click on this icon right here where it says Ignore Auto Layout, now we can move it freely. Okay, we can place it here or whatever we want. We can place it in the corner if we want, but then in order for it to show, we select this frame, and then we deselect this option where it says clip content. We click, and now we can see it right here. There are a lot of people that hate auto layout, and they say that auto layout has too many constraints and that it doesn't help creativity. But I believe that auto layout is a very nice tool that helps you stay organized and also helps you become more efficient. And you can be as creative as you want, you just have to know how to leverage it. Now let's explore the advanced auto layout features. So if we select this frame, here in the properties panel, when we click on this icon right here, this panel will open, okay? And then here we have these three options: strokes, canvas stacking, and align text baseline. Let's explore the first option, strokes. So by default, the stroke is excluded. And that means that the stroke is taking space and overlaps with the padding, as we can see here, okay? So it's basically taking space. Now let's see what happens if we include this stroke. As you can see, now it doesn't overlap with the padding. And this is how usually strokes are used in CSS. So for development handoff, it's better to include the strokes. It's better to always include the strokes because that's usually how websites are built. So if you include the strokes, the final website will match the design much more accurately after development. Now let's talk about the next option, canvas stacking. So the elements that are inside of an auto layout frame can have a negative space between them. And then if you set the space to be negative like this, as you can see, they stack on top of each other. And to change the order of the stacking, you can simply select this option first on top, or this option last on top. The next option we have is align text baseline. And we can use this option in different scenarios. For example, if we want all these different text sizes to share the same baseline instead of being aligned based on their bounding boxes, we can simply enable this option. Okay, we click on this icon, and now as we can see, they all share the same baseline. And to deactivate it, we can simply click on this icon right here. So keep in mind that when this option is enabled, all different text sizes inside of the auto layout frame will share the same baseline regardless of the text line height. Now let's explore the min and max values. So we have this auto layout frame. Now, if we resize it and we make it smaller, we can see how there is no limit, right? But let's say we want to limit the width so it's never smaller than 300 pixels. And we can do that by setting a minimum width. To do it, let's select this frame. And then here in the properties panel, we click on this arrow right here. And then we click here where it says add minimum width. And now here we can write 300 pixels. And now if we try to resize this frame beyond 300 pixels, we can't. Okay? There is a hard stop. And we can do the same thing with the maximum width. Now we can stretch this as much as we want. But let's say we want to limit it to 700 pixels. So while we have this frame selected, we go to the properties panel and then we click on this arrow again. And now we click on add max width. Now we can add 700 pixels. And then if we try to resize this frame beyond 700 pixels, we can't. There is a hard stop. You can also apply the max and min width to the elements inside of the auto layout frame. So let's say we don't want this text to have a width larger than 400 pixels. We can go to the properties panel while we have this text selected, and then we do the same thing. We click on this arrow, and then we click on add max width, and then here we add 400 pixels. And now, no matter how much we stretch this main frame, the text will always have a maximum width of 400 pixels. Let me remove the max width on this main frame. So I will go here and then remove this and look at the text as we resize, okay? It will always have a maximum width of 400 pixels. Let me show you a little trick. I will select the text and then here in the properties panel, I will remove the max width. And now let's say we resize the card to this point, and then we want the width of the text to remain this size as a maximum, regardless of how much we resize the main frame. And we can do that by clicking on the text, and then here in the properties panel, we click here and then add max width, and then we click on this icon right here, and then we click on set to current width. And now the current width is 539 pixels. So if we try to resize the main frame, as we can see, it works. Now I will make a little demonstration to make sure you understand how all this works. So here we have the main frame, and then here we have the content that will go inside of this frame. So I will place this frame right here, and then this button right here, and then this text right here. Now I will select this frame, okay? And then I will press Shift A on my keyboard. Now we have auto layout activated, as we can see here. And the next thing I will do while we have this frame selected is to basically change the padding on all sides to 30 pixels. So I will press Control or Command on my keyboard, and then I will click here, and now I will add 30 pixels. Now we have 30 pixels on all sides. Now, as we can see here, the space between items is 30 pixels, and I will change it to 40. So here in the properties panel, I click here, and then I change this to 40. Now we have a 40 pixel space between items. Now, every time I resize this card, I want this image to stay in the center. And to accomplish that, I will basically select this frame, and then I will press Shift A on my keyboard, and then here, while I have this frame selected, okay, in the properties panel, I will click here where it says Align Center. Now this is in the center, this icon, and then every time I resize the card, the icon will remain in the center. Now I will resize this card a little bit, and I want the text to have this as the maximum width. So I don't want the text to go over this width, no matter how much we stretch this card. So I will select this text, and then here in the properties panel, I will click right here on this arrow, and then I will click on add max width, and then I will click on this arrow, and then I will click on set current width. And now we can see how it's 464 pixels. And no matter how much we stretch this card, the maximum width for the text will be 464 pixels. This text has the width set to fill container. That's why when we resize this frame, we can see how it adapts, okay? Obviously respecting the maximum width. And since the main frame has the height set to hug, every time we add more text right here, we can see how it adapts. Basically, this frame hugs the content and then resizes as needed. Now I will give you a quick example of how to use nested frames. So here we have a header, and then we have the menu items, and then we have this button, and we have the logo as well. The first thing we want to do is to basically select each of these menu items and then activate auto layout on each, in case we want to manipulate them later. Now we click on each of these while we press Shift on our keyboard. And then in the Properties panel, we change the padding on all sides. And to do that, we press Ctrl on our keyboard. And then we click. And then let's change these to 8 pixels. Now, each of these menu items have a padding of 8 pixels on each side. Now we select all the menu items and then we press Shift A to activate auto layout. Okay, so now they are grouped inside of an auto layout frame. Now while we have this frame selected, the navigation menu frame, we press Shift on our keyboard and then we select this one as well, the button, and now we press Shift A. Now we can align everything to the center by clicking here, and then we can change the space between the navigation menu and the button to 32 pixels. Now we have this arrow right here, and I want to add it inside of the button. So I will select the button, and then I will press Shift A to activate auto layout, and then I will drag this arrow inside of the button. Now let's select the button, and then here in the Properties panel, we change the space between items to 16 pixels. Now let's select the logo, and then we press Shift A to activate auto layout, just in case we want to manipulate the padding. Now we select the main frame, and then we activate auto layout. Now let's select the logo, and then let's set the padding on all sides to 0 pixels, because since this main frame is set to hug, so the height is set to hug, we don't want the padding in the logo to affect the size of the header, okay? Now let's select the header, and then let's set the padding on all sides to 16 pixels. Now we select the header again, and let's add a minimum width because we don't want this to happen, okay? So we resize the header to something like this. And then here in the Properties panel, we click on this arrow, and then we click here where it says Add Minimum Width, and then we click on this arrow, and then we click on Set to Current Width. And now it works perfectly. Now let's check the structure. So we have this main frame, okay, the header, and then we have this nested frame, which is the logo, and then we have another nested frame, which is the frame containing the navigation menu and the button, and then we have another nested frame inside of this frame, which is the navigation menu, okay, and then we have another nested frame, which is the button, and that's it. And finally, now you know how to use Figma Auto Layout. I've uploaded here on YouTube a full web design course that's 17 hours and 41 minutes long, and you can watch it totally for free. You can check it out here. It's amazing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this video was valuable, and I will see you in the next one.